Hi everybody, and welcome to this special presentation from the Liptember Foundation and Transitioning Well. My name's Louise Browne. I'm the Head of Public Health and Education at Bri Hayllar. Today I'm going to be talking with Bri Hayllar, a psychologist from Transitioning Well. We're going to talk about how to get our life and our health back on track. So if you think that over COVID you're the only one who's put on weight, stopped going to the doctor, missed health checks, stopped being fit or done no activity, you're not alone. The Bri Hayllar's 2022 Women's Health Survey results have just come out, and the results show that almost half of women say that their physical and mental health has declined over that period. 20% of people have stopped doing their everyday activities. 1 in 5 have skipped going to the doctor. Almost 10% of people have skipped those important health checks like their mammogram or their cervical screening. So, Bri, are you surprised that people are struggling to take care of themselves at the moment?
Not surprised at all, given everything that we've all been through. I mean, we've been through so much in the last couple of years that it's no surprise that it's been hard to look after ourselves in the midst of all of this. And there's a couple of reasons for it, and I think really the biggest one is just we had our lives just flipped upside down, and when that happened, we lost a lot of our really good routines. So human beings, we love to put things on autopilot. We love to make things habits. And so a lot of our good habits that might have been around things like exercise or catching up with loved ones, eating well, good sleep, medical checks and looking after ourselves, I think we just lost a lot of those in the flip that happened to us. And it's been hard to put those back in place. And I would say too, women in particular over the last couple of years have really taken a lot of the load, and so carried a lot of the additional burdens around childcare, particularly when the centres were closed, homeschooling, all the working from home, looking after others in the community or loved ones. And I think a lot of women particularly just haven't felt they've had the time or the energy or maybe even the permission to really prioritise that self-care. So it's probably not a surprise at all that it's hard to get back into those rhythms at the moment. We definitely can, but at the moment it's feeling a bit hard for some people, I think.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot at Bri Hayllar's. Do you think people are being a bit hard on themselves about what they haven't done over the last few years?
Look, I think it's a pretty natural, normal human thing to be pretty hard on ourselves. It's normal and it's common, doesn't mean it's terribly effective, but there's a reason that we are hard on ourselves. That self-criticism's often there as a way to try and motivate ourselves. Now, sometimes that works. If we say, come on, you could do that better, that might motivate us to have another go at something. But I think when we get pulled into that cycle of really harsh self-criticism, like I should have coped better and I shouldn't have gained all that weight and I should have made better use of that time, I think we can sometimes pull ourselves into feelings like shame or embarrassment or anxiety or even just feel really quite threatened. And that's not a helpful place. That's not going to motivate us at all. In fact, that's going to make us sort of hold back from being willing to get out there and try things, have a go, look after ourselves, do those helpful things. So very common, very normal, but not very helpful. We all do it though.
We need to stop ourselves when we fall into that kind of, being too tough.
Well, it's very normal, but the key is just to notice if we are being tough on ourselves and try and just sort of change that to a softer, kinder, more self-compassionate sort of self-talk. But, I think about it like this. We have had such a challenging time over the last couple of years. It's a bit like thinking about, if you're at the beach and you're swimming and you get pulled into a rip, right? You are just going to do your very best to get out of that. And when you do get out of it, you're not going to beat yourself up about where in the ocean you landed. You're just going to be thankful that you landed, and you're going to go about the really important job of getting yourself back to shore. And that's really where we are at the moment, is we're thinking, you know what, I got thrown around in the last couple of years, but beating myself up isn't going to help. I just need to be kind to myself and get myself back to shore.
So now the road back, Bri, how do we get started with that?
Yeah, look, I think a good place to start, and this might kind of seem a bit weird, but I think a good place to start is just to decide you're on the road back, right? We've talked a lot in the last couple of years, you've probably heard it, people talk about the idea that we're running this marathon. But the difference between this experience and a marathon is that in a marathon, well, I've never run a marathon, but I imagine when you're running a marathon, you know how to pace yourself because you know where the finish line is. And in this experience, we haven't known where the finish line is. And sometimes we've felt like we're right at the finish line and then it's moved. And we've had to dig really deep and keep running. So it's been quite different to that. And there isn't going to be a finish line. It's just going to gradually sort of peter out over time. So the decision about this is where I start the road back. This is the point that I say recovery starts from now. And that's not up to me to decide when your line is. That's entirely up to you to decide that. But sometimes that can just be a nice mindset shift that says, you know, I'm out of the rip or I've crossed the line or whatever metaphor you want to use and I'm on the road back.
So before we get to questions from the audience, Bri, I think it would be good to know, do you think this experience has been the same for everybody?
No, you know, we often say it's same storm, different boats. So everybody's been having very, very different experience. And really how we navigate life transitions, how we get through difficult times is always different. So it depends on the situation that we were in. So that makes a difference in terms of how we were coping. I mean, for someone, if they were living in a comfortable home, everyone in the house kept their jobs and everyone was well and not you know, sort of worried about underlying illnesses, that's going to have been a very, very different experience to, say, someone who was living in insecure accommodation, maybe lots of people in the house lost their jobs, homeschooling, nowhere to work from home, maybe being immune compromised or having elderly people who there was a real worry about risk of exposure. I mean, just those circumstances alone make things really different in terms of how we cope. And then, of course, we bring ourselves to every transition, our coping skills and just who we naturally are. Are we more optimistic? Are we resilient? Have we been through something like this before? And then there's support. So the support that we have around us, we know that makes a huge difference to how we cope with things in life. And there's all sorts of reasons why in the last couple of years people might not have had good support through no fault of their own. I mean, people who are living in another country or another state from their loved ones would have been quite disconnected. For the Melbourne experience, you know, if you didn't have someone living in your 5-kilometre radius, you might not have really physically seen important people in your life for long periods of time. And then, of course, anyone who lost their job just immediately lost a big social network. So there's all of these factors that make every experience different for every individual. So it's definitely been different for everyone.
Yeah, I think we saw that ourselves just in our own group, you know, our own social groups. You saw how the impact was very different for different people. So we're going to have some questions from our audience now, and I don't think these will be unique. I think lots of people will have very similar questions to these. So this person says, I don't want to go back to my GP for my regular checkup. I've put on so much weight. Should I just wait until my health improves before I make my visit?
Yeah, I think this is a really common experience. So there's probably a couple of things in there that I would like to talk about. I think the weight gain is a good one to start with because lots of people have had shifts in their weight over the COVID experience. And it's really easy, again, to be self-critical and beat ourselves up about that. There's actually some reasons that underlie why we might have been doing a lot of comfort eating, a lot of emotional eating over the last little while. So some of them are just situational. So we were just at home. Now, for some people, they were busy, and that was just a stress release, is to go and eat. For some people, they had nothing going on. They might have been bored and isolated, so it was just a way to cope with loneliness, with boredom, etc. And the thing is, when we comfort eat, we don't comfort eat Brussels sprouts and broccoli. We comfort
If only.
eat high energy, calorie dense food. And
There was
there's-
certainly a baking boom, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I guess that's another reason, isn't it? A lot of people were just cooking and eating because it was something to do. We were pretty limited in what we could do. So, yeah, that was definitely part of it. So, if we think about why we go after those energy-dense foods, there's a couple of really cool reasons for that. So hopefully this will allow people to kind of negotiate with their self-criticism there, is to quieten that down. First of all, when we're stressed, we release hormones that make us want to go and eat. It makes us crave those high energy foods. When we're tired, and I know so many of us have felt so exhausted during this time, is that our body is nudging us towards that quick fix of energy. Right? So we've got these stress hormones that are making us want to eat. We've got fatigue, which is nudging us towards food. The other thing that we've got is that when we eat those foods, it feels good. And that activates our reward systems. And what happens when our reward system gets activated is it says, do it again, right? So we eat the high calorie, sugary food and it feels good and our body says, do more of that, right? So we've got all of these things that are all feeding on themselves to make us eat more of this food that's causing us to gain weight. So it's sort of a triple whammy going on.
And just in terms of going back to the GP, like what do we suggest to people there? You know, put it off or just go right in?
Yeah, of course, it probably comes as no surprise that I'm going to say definitely go and see your GP. Those checks are an important part of looking after ourselves. But again, there are reasons why we might not have done that. So one of the things that we haven't talked about much with the COVID experience is that it's been a weird kind of time warping experience. Yeah, we kind of
I hear you.
It hasn't it felt strange? Like sometimes there were days that felt like they lasted forever, but at the same time, months just went past like that. And that's that sort of time warpy experience. And what can have happened there is that we just lost our regular rhythm of going and seeing the doctor or going and having things like a pap smear or a breast screen or whatever we need to do. So that's one reason that we maybe haven't been doing that. But that whole idea of putting off going to the doctor now because we feel uncomfortable, we might feel uncomfortable about how we're going to be perceived, maybe worried that we're going to be judged about that weight gain. So the first thing I guess I would encourage you to think about is that your doctor is a human being too. And unlike a lot of other stressful times in our life, your doctor has just been through this same experience as well. So hopefully they're going to have a lot of empathy about that. Your doctor also, they're not your school teacher, they're not there to tell you off. They're there to be your partner on your health journey. So I would encourage you to kind of think about them as playing that role. But of course, if you actually feel like your doctor is judging you, then maybe have a think about that relationship you have with your doctor. A couple of things to think about. One is doctors are human beings just like everyone else, and sometimes there are sometimes there are people that we get along with, and sometimes there are people we just don't click with. It's really important that we have a good relationship with our doctor, that we feel that they respect us, that they have good intentions towards us, that they care for us, they're kind. And so if you don't feel like you have that relationship, it's entirely possible to go and find yourself another GP. It's also good to just check in with yourself here, because when we're stressed, if we're feeling anxious or maybe depressed, if we're not feeling like our usual self, sometimes our thoughts get a little bit distorted and we might be a little bit sensitive to things like our weight. And maybe we're just misinterpreting what the doctor means when they say something, or maybe we're doing a really common thinking trap, and that's called mind reading. That's where we like to imagine that we know what other people are thinking. That's a really common one. So our worries about what our doctor might say about our weight might actually just be our own thoughts, our own worries, and actually not at all like what the doctor is going to say.
And sometimes, you know, our doctors can be a little bit more blunt maybe than we would be with a girlfriend, for instance. But I think the intentions can be right. Sometimes the delivery maybe not be as soft as we'd like. And I mean, I think that can be tough to take, but it's also good to think about what's behind it, I think, as well.
Yeah, and even gently just sort of saying something to the doctor, giving them a little feedback. And it might just sound like, you know, doctor, when you say whatever they just said, I actually feel really judged and that doesn't help me. Might just give them an opportunity to understand how they're being received and how we're hearing what they're saying.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. So this question is, I'm putting off my breast screen because my friend was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. I've been watching her go through the treatment and I'm so scared to even get tested now.
Yeah, it's a really common response when we've seen someone go through such a challenging, difficult experience. So again, we want to not be too hard on ourselves. There's a reason why we might respond like that, and that's because our human brains are very motivated by what's happening now. So any fear or worry that you're feeling about seeing your friend's experience, if that's making you feel that emotion, the fear, the worry, your brain wants you to not feel that feeling, okay? And so it wants you to avoid. It wants you to avoid the thing that's bringing on that feeling. And so that might cause us to avoid going and getting that breast screen. So what we want to do, it's almost like we want to trick our brains, because our rational brains, when we're not thinking through our emotions, our rational brains know, of course, that going and getting that breast screen is actually a really great thing to do, because the earlier we catch it, the better the outcome. So what we want to do is we kind of want to trick our thinking brain, our future thinking brain, into being motivated to do that now. And I like to get you to think about this as engaging your willingness, okay? So what I mean by that is I want to get you to think about, why do you want to go and get that breast screen? Why do you want to go and have that health check? Often it might be about things like, because I want to catch it early if there is something there, because I want to be healthy and well and have the best chance of recovery for my kids or my life and all the things that I want to do. So once we know why we are willing to do something, then we can increase our motivation to do it. And we practice willingness all the time. I was out last night, it was raining, my petrol tank was almost empty, and I knew I had to leave first thing this morning. I didn't want to go and stand in the cold and the rain and fill up my petrol tank, but I was willing to do it because it was so important to me not to run out of petrol this morning, okay? So we do it all the time. So what we can do when we think about that breast screen is we say to ourselves, I don't like feeling anxious and worried about this test or the outcome of the test. I don't like that feeling. I don't want that feeling, but I'm willing to have it because it's so important to me to be healthy, to be well, to catch, if there is something, to catch it early. So I would definitely encourage us to try and trick our in-the-moment brain to be motivated by those future benefits.
And even something like, you know, taking a girlfriend with you to have the breast screen, is that something you think, you know, might ease someone into that situation that they're fearful about?
Yeah, definitely. You know, when we connect with other people, we get a hit of oxytocin. That's very calming for our system. And of course, just that accountability and that support in the moment. And even more importantly, it means after you've had it, you can go and do something really nice and rewarding for yourself for having done that great thing.
A good treat. I think many of us will recognise this one. It's a culmination of lots of things. I have completely let myself go during the last few years. My casual work has dried up. Financially, I'm struggling. I've put on weight, like many of us. I've been drinking too much. I'm not sure where to start to get back on track.
Well, first of all, I would say I'm so sorry to hear you've had so much going on. You know, there's a lot of people who've just really had a roller coaster and they've just, you know, had one thing after another. When we look at transition theory as psychologists, we call these counter transitions. This is like, it never rains, but it pours. And sometimes when we're in that experience, it can be quite hard to sort of figure out where to start first, and we sort of find ourselves just circling around, not kind of knowing where to get started. What we want to do is we want to get some good success, because that's going to reward us to keep doing that thing and help us feel confident in moving forward. So whether it's what you're eating, around your weight, or maybe exercise, or your drinking behaviour, whichever one feels like you can do something. Now, sometimes when we've got a lot going on, we try and fix lots of things at once. We try and change all of our habits at the same time. You know, like on New Year's Eve, where you promise yourself you're going to be a totally better human being. You're going to stop drinking, and you're going to eat better, and you're going to exercise, and you're going to call your nana, and you're going to save the planet and just be a brilliant human being. And it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it's very hard for human brains to form new habits too many at a time. It's too hard to do too many at the same time. So when we think about our brains, we talk about the idea that neurons, which is just brain cells, so brain cells that fire together, wire together. And all that means is that the more often you shoot off in a certain direction, the more often you do a certain pattern of behaviour, it sort of wears a path in your brain. A bit like if you were going for a walk in the bush, right? You pull up in the car park, and there's the path. It's just really easy to walk down. You don't even have to think about it. Just on autopilot, you walk down it. And that's like a habit in your brain. So if you want to make a new habit, it might be an old one, you've lost it, but it's a new one that you want to either recreate or a brand new, fresh one. It is a bit like walking a new path in the bush. It's going to take some effort and some time, some repetition. You're going to have to keep walking over that path a few times before it starts to become obvious and easy to walk down. If you're trying to create 10 new paths in the bush at the same time, who's got the time and energy to do that? That's way too hard. They will have grown over before you've got time to go back to them. So think about habits like that. Pick one, a really, really nice, easy one. And then repeat that until it's on autopilot in your brain, and then you can start the next one.
So those old paths, I've lost them. Are they gone forever, or can I kind of start bush bashing, get them back?
Not at all. Go bush bashing, definitely, because often the trace of it's still there. So, and in fact, it's often easier to put back in a habit that was already there, because you've already got some established pathways. I mean, we've got more connections in our brain than there are stars in the sky. So those connections are often still there, and once you start going back to them, they'll refresh.
So Bri, when you're talking about manageable things, are they kind of the things that you have a bit of control over?
Yeah, so the manageable things are often the small enough ones that feel achievable, that feel doable. We often say they're the good enough goal, or the thing that's actually too hard not to do. So if you want to exercise more, it might be just going around the block. It's so easy, it's so manageable, that it's very achievable. But you're absolutely right. Looking at our goals and looking at how we measure our progress forward, looking at the things that are in our control is really important. And some of the things that were raised here by this person are things that aren't necessarily in our control today. So losing 15 kilos, that's not in your control today to do that. Eating good food today, doing a bit of exercise today, those are things that are in your control. So we measure the success of today by those steps toward that goal. Getting a job, I mean, unless you happen to run a business, it can give yourself a job. That's not necessarily in your control, but you know what? Going out and handing out your resume or hopping online and applying for some jobs, that is in your control. So when we measure our success each day by the things that we actually have the ability to influence or control, it's much more empowering, and we feel a lot better about our situation. So I would definitely encourage people to take that approach.
Yeah, so start small is your message really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Start small, achievable, manageable, and the things that are in your control.
So Bri, I'm feeling so much better about all these things at the moment. So thanks so much for everything that you've talked about today. I think it's going to be really helpful for people. Can you leave us with one last message?
Yeah, thanks Louise, and thanks for having me here. Look, I think the thing that I would leave everyone with is just to recognise that everyone has done their best to get through what has been really a difficult and challenging experience. So rather than focusing on fixing everything at once, let's just recognise that progress is better than perfection.
I love it. Thanks so much, Bri, for your time today. So thanks for being with us today, and remember, jeanhales.org.au is a website where you can get lots of great health information.